How many times did it take you to realize it was Wednesday? It took me a few times.
Oh, I can't believe it's already Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
Where is this winter going?
I know.
It's Fly Tying Live Wednesday.
We're back, everybody.
Woohoo!
Welcome. We're live from the snowpocalypse. It is rocking outside the fly shop doors.
Definitely, it's snowing.
It's snowing. So hopefully
We need it.
all of you are home safe, comfortably dug in, ready to tie some flies.
Hopefully
I mean,
you
what
have your own little beer going, a little toddy.
You didn't get me one?
Well, I'll get you one.
We'll wait till Ted starts
We'll
tying.
wait, yeah.
So welcome
already
back,
had
everybody.
two.
We already got 50 people tuned in, which is awesome. And I'm sure we'll get many, many, many more. Brian, would you like to introduce our guest this evening?
You know, I would love to introduce our own Ted Kraimer. And for those of you who don't know Ted, he has been one of our guides since the inception of the Northern Angler. So he is a great team player. We're so happy to have him on board. He is one of truly the only guides, I think, that pays his bills on time. Probably has enough credit to take care of all of us, credit point wise. Doesn't really drink to excess, has never done drugs ever once.
You're making us sound
And
terrible.
I'm just saying, like he's like the most pure person.
I
And I will say, I will
Pure.
say he is pure. And
We're talking Gus Johnson pure. Like there should be a soundboard.
I
soundboard
think there
for that.
should be a soundboard for that, but no, Ted's such a great guy, and we're so one of my dear friends, and we're so happy to have him on board, and we're happy to have him tying tonight. He's usually kind of reclusive in the winter, and I can't believe he came out of his hibernation. We kind of see him maybe once a week. He pops into town to do some grocery shopping. So tonight he's going to be tying some awesome patterns for us. It looks like he has the first pattern looks like his Hex, which is a killer pattern. And I'm looking forward to his insight. And welcome aboard, Ted.
Well, thank you, and thanks for not giving up on me and keep on inviting me. So
It only
I figured
took-
I had to take one for the team, and I was betting pretty much 100% on no social media, but there goes my record. So
We gotcha.
Yeah,
I
no,
think maybe
finally
this
got
internet
you.
thing it might stick.
It only took 3 years. So, I mean, a little bit, one more plug for Ted. You can check him out at current-works.com. That's his website, his guide service. And a lot of his patterns are on there. It's been an amazing resource for me over the years and a lot of other anglers. He's got great articles about fishing techniques, all those, all the good stuff that everyone should be out there referencing, including a hatch chart, which is seemingly hard to find, although we do have the new Ann Miller book.
yes,
in,
we're
which
very excited. To have
really excited to
Ann
have
Miller
that
book
back in. So cool things. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And then we're going to have Ted pick a number
Oh, for our winner last
for
week.
our winner for, the plate that fell off Kevin's truck, right?
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's
This is this
I
one.
forgot
right
about
here.
that. Yeah.
This one.
I'm
and-
curious to see what falls off Ted's truck. So that's,
Well, you can tell nothing's gonna fall off
Nothing.
Ted's truck because it's good. We have the Women Want Me, Fish Fear Me license plate.
we didn't give this away
And,
already, right?
No,
I get
and
my Wednesdays run
I
together.
think,
Sorry,
if
everyone.
not, and we have the Loon accessory fly type.
If not, we'll just double down.
So,
Whatever.
Yep.
We're not scared.
So Ted, pick a
Drum
number
roll
between
here, I
1
feel like.
and 48, if you would please.
21.
Ooh, 21.
Winner,
All right.
winner. Hold on, let me pull up the spreadsheet here. Wow, that font is really small. Brian, can you read that?
I can. I just took my Coast Guard licensing test today, and it looks like. Sorry, I can't.
I bet everybody saw me squinting. That's really embarrassing. It's Alex K. Alex.
Alex Kurdziel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, congratulations.
Boom.
You're
Awesome.
the lucky winner.
Thanks
of
for entering.
last week's prize. So
Yeah.
thanks everyone for participating in our weekly events. We
had
have a
fun
good
with
time
that.
doing it, and it's something that helps us pass by the winter, and
Yeah.
it is flying by. We are
It
so
is.
looking forward to our spring
What do-
steelhead season. It's right on top of
Do you know
us.
what is next weekend, Brian?
Next weekend is the Fly Fishing Film Tour right here in Traverse City, Michigan.
I can't believe it's next weekend.
I can't believe it's next weekend, and hopefully we will get the DVDs or downloads because we haven't received those yet. It's making me a little nervous. I've been up since 4:30 this morning, and
Brian's
little
been
on edge.
bouncing off the walls with this new mushroom coffee thing.
Let me talk about Rise coffee.
Oh my gosh.
The Rise
Sponsorship.
Hey, maybe they'll sponsor me. I could be like one of these Instagram famous people. Like
Influencer.
I could be an influencer. Can you imagine me? I'd be a bad influence. Anyway,
You already
Mr. Bad
are.
Example. Anyway,
Ted, where are we tying tonight? Before we get too far down.
We're going to tie a number of different flies, but, I've watched most of the previous tires, and you guys have had a lot of great tires and guides come out and really share a ton of information. I've actually rewatched a couple of them, and it's amazing when you watch them a second time how much info you can get. So I'd encourage people to go back and look at some of those. But with that being said, there's been a lot of good flies that have been shared. So what could I do a little bit different? And kind of my theme today is to kind of share some patterns that we can use for our fisheries. And our fisheries are diverse, right? We've got so many different species. So why not tie a fly that we could use for 1, 2, maybe even possibly 3 different species? So when we go fishing and we grab a fly box, let's say we grab this fly box, trout, and the next day we're going smallmouth fishing, we can grab that same fly. So the idea is to kind of do a little bit of a theme like that where we can use them for different species, different conditions. I'm going to do a couple of variations of the same pattern, so the sound of music. So I don't know, I'm not much of a talker, I don't think, so I'm just going to get more to tying. So I'm going to throw this in there so you guys kind of get an idea of where we're going with tying, what we're going to tie. And this is essentially as a Hex Nymph. Just one other note, if you're a trout fisherman and we start getting into steelhead fishing, stick around. You're going to learn something that can probably be used for different species. If you're a streamer fisherman, even though we're tying this, stick around. We're going to see this in kind of a streamer format. So, yeah, more geared towards Michigan, but not totally or exclusively. So,
Hey, Ted.
Yeah.
Before you get started,
Please.
Everyone's going to see a little bit of blue reflection in your vise. I don't have the camera set up, but do you want to touch on that really quick? I think it's a cool tip for people, struggling to see.
The board?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm a big proponent of using a poster board. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's cheap, $1 poster board. And I have that on my desk at home. And there's a couple of reasons for it. If I spill head cement, I don't ruin a table.
Right.
More importantly, I've got a nice, clear, neutral background. So my eye is not fighting wood grain behind me. So I'm not getting eye fatigue as I'm tying. I'm kind of an ergonomics guy. If you'll also notice, I tie on a C-clamp versus a pedestal. I don't like pedestal because my shoulders are up high, and that leads to fatigue. Also, when you tie on a pedestal, or at least for myself, when I tie on a pedestal, I don't have the room to work. But when I'm down here, I can do all sorts of things down here and manipulate materials. So this is personally how I do it.
Yeah.
I also write down notes and materials I need or flies I need to tie. If I'm cutting lead and I need like that much lead, I'll mark 2 marks on the thing and peel it off so I'm consistently with the same amount. So it's just something I find really helpful, but maybe you do. Give it a shot.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's a good tip for people.
It also keeps things kind of clear too. My desk isn't always this clean. When I get tying, I get some ideas going, it can turn into a mess, but I usually clean it up. But it does, it can get a little wild. So anyways, the first fly is a Hex Nymph. This you can actually use for steelhead fishing. You can also use for trout fishing. Where this kind of came from is, we all know Jim Empey. Jim Empey had a hex pattern, and Jim Empey was a guide from, I think, the 90s, local area. He's still around, not a guide, but he had this cool fly, and he tied it with Lydia's sparkle yarn for an extended tail, and it was pretty cool. And this is kind of how this came about. I wanted it a little bit more natural, a little bit more realistic. So we're going to tie this a couple different ways. Hooks we're using, scud hook, Tiemco 2457, 1120 Daiichi, both size 6s, whatever your favorite or whatever you can get. Using some 6/0 camel, and then basically take that right up to above the point, maybe a little bit beyond, maybe not quite to the barb. Then I'm going to take some pheasant tail, and you don't need to use your really good pheasant tail. You can use kind of the ones that are off to the sides. You just need, you know, make sure it's long enough. And I'm going to grab maybe 6. It's not that important. And just peel that off. I'm going to lay that up on the hook, and I'm going to extend it so it's about 2.5 times my hook. So from the point, or I'm sorry, from the bend of the hook to the eye of the hook, 2.5 times beyond, and I'm just going to lash that in there. Right,
you know, pheasant tail is such a versatile material. We use it for so many things here in the Great Lakes.
Got some mono eyes. We're going to tie that, and we're going to put those right up behind the hook eye. And we're going to advance our thread back here. Instead of using Lydia's sparkle yarn, I use EP fiber. So Enrico Puglisi tan.
Say that 5 times.
And the hard part is picking the right amount. What I do is I pinch the base here. If that's in focus, I pinch that and I pull out what I think I need. And this is long. And what I'm going to do is take it and fold it into 3 equal pieces. And once I've got 3 equal pieces, I'll come in and square it up. As far as the amount is concerned, I want it to be, it's a little too thick. Let me reduce some. I want it to be maybe like when I pull it, kind of snug, not super tight, but snug. I want it to be about the thickness of a matchstick. And we're going to take this and put it so it sticks out about a good 1.5 times the hook length off the back. I'm just going to tie that in like that, maybe a little shorter. And I'm going to secure it with a few wraps. And once that's there, we're going to take this part, fold it back, put a couple wraps to kind of get it up out of the way. And the reason I tie and don't just grab a big chunk of that stuff and tie a bunch of flies with it is I want this longer stuff to be long to separate it from this tail part. I don't know if that made sense. It might make sense when we go forth. When you're tying this fly, I like to use the Indian saddle. Cheap, super useful. I mean, you can do so many different things with this. I've got bunches of these. Brahma hen, Indian saddle, it's the same thing. And after you tie one, you're going to have, where we use it for our hackle up front, we'll have the back part of a feather. So what we'll do is we're going to take the back part of the feather. See that okay?
Yep.
And we're going to trim it so we got a good sized chunk of it. And I'm going to lay that right back in here. And I'm going to fold that up on top. And what that's going to do is give me those real pronounced gills that's on a Hex Nymph. Okay. Next, we're going to take some ostrich herl and tan, 2 to 3 strands.
Is that just naturals, Ted?
It's tan. No, it's dyed tan.
Okay.
Yeah, natural, I believe, is gray.
Yeah.
So then I'm going to take this and I'm going to kind of wind it throughout that thorax region, bring it right back up to where I tied those gills in. I'm going to take these 3 strands and I'm going to weave it around that thread. And what that does is, this stuff's pretty fragile and that really reinforces it. And I use an old toothbrush and I just kind of buff it out and get a little bit more flare from that material. And I'm going to wind that forward, basically producing that thorax right up to behind the eyes, about the correct thickness, not the right thickness. And we're going to tie it off. Come in, trim off your excess, and then we're going to come in with a hackle. And again, Indian saddle hackle. We want to make sure it's not too big. And how we measure a hackle is, I'm going to pull these fibers off the stem, and we want to see how far that distance is. And that's basically the tie-in, so that kind of gives me an idea of how far back it is. You don't want this extending too far back. So you don't want it like a super thick, and you don't want it too small. So then what I do is I grab it by the tip, tie it in, kind of like on a 45-degree angle, trim off your excess. I'm going to fold in this hackle right up behind the mono eyes. And about two, 3 times, tie that off. And when I cut this, this is what I'm going to use for the gills on the next one. Hopefully that kind of made that clear, what I tried to address earlier. I'm going to advance the thread to between the hook eye and the mono eyes. Now I've got this longer piece here, and I'm going to draw it right in between the gills, right up over the top, essentially forming a wing case. And I'm going to secure that there. If you watch closely here, what I want to do is take this thread and come up over the top behind the eyes and do a couple of wraps. And that kind of protects that from getting nicked by a tooth or hemostats. Just makes for a little bit more solid, stronger fly. I'm now going to take that excess EP fiber, pull it over, cut this off kind of on an angle, and now you can kind of see how that thing's coming around.
Oh, that's super sexy.
Yeah. I use an old-fashioned whip finisher. I like the extended reach myself. They're easy enough to do. Whoa, perfect. Broke just in the nick of time. So yeah, that's majority of the fly. But if you look at this tail, it's kind of loose. So what I'll do is I use some Fly Master, some heavier thread. I'll just pull it off my bobbin. I usually have a number of bobbins at my fly tying station.
That's probably 210 denier.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, Fly Master Plus.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I do a double overhand knot. And I bring it up and around that, and then I draw it and kind of lasso it, and I work it. I don't know if you can see my hands in the way. Try to get it out, and then I slide it just so it captures just the very end of it. Draw it tight. I can trim off the excess. Leave it a little bit long. And that's majority of it. Okay.
Nice.
That's
So that
the
gives you a
secret.
nice little
That's
wiggle.
the secret.
And if you think about, yeah, it took me a while to figure that one out. When you think about that pattern, if you're fishing it as a nymph, it's going to be, dead drift, and it's going to get a little bit of movement. You can get those gills moving. It's pretty solid. But if you ever look at a hex nymph, like most of our nymphs, it's two-tone, just like a hex dry. Super dark on top, light on the bottom.
Right.
So one of my favorite things that I use on a lot of flies is just a brown Sharpie marker. I've had this one forever. In fact, I just bought another one last week just in case they discontinue it or something. I've got it in storage. Anyways, I'm going to take this and I'm going to color the top part of the EP fibers to give me that top. I'm going to grab the tip here and just come back and kind of bring it back. Kind of looks a little funny sometimes. You leave the vise with some brown fingertips. But that's almost 100% done. This stuff, I don't know where I picked it. I may have picked it up on one of the fly tying things that you guys did in the past. This glue, this Loctite super glue gel, is a real thick formula, and what's so cool about it is it doesn't run. So I don't like tying with super glue because it can, if you're not careful, man, you'll be sticking to everything. But this stuff stays in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and just put a drop, and I'm done. The other cool thing about this, I've been running this for like a year and a half. Most of the time your super glues go dry, but because it's got those squeezers, the tube doesn't fill up and dry. It's great.
Yeah, those do seem to last a nice long time.
Yeah.
I think we've all. Oops, sorry, I'm on mute. I think we've all. I don't know. I tell a lot of people I keep vice grips on my desk just to get the Zap-A-Gap open after a week because it's. It trains me to open all the sauce jars and stuff at home too, so it's good. It's strength training.
This won't come to a surprise to you too, but I'm a redundancy guy. So I've got a desk drawer where I keep a lot of my glues and stuff. I usually throw that in there in case something bad happens. It just keeps it contained.
Sure.
So.
What other colors do you tie this in, Ted?
Well, that's kind of what we're going to get into. This is like a supernatural looking hex.
That is. And do you ever fish this like during the hex hatch as like an
sometimes
emerger?
we'll do a little bit underneath a dry fly. I'm more of an emerger guy. You know, in Michigan, I don't do a whole lot of nymph fishing. But, when you're talking about hex emergence, you're talking about a pretty good sized bug sitting around mud. It's not a bad idea to throw that around and see what happens. You can actually swim them because when they get active, they're actually swimming a little bit.
They move.
So it's kind of not a bad fly to put underneath something big like a big stone, because stones are out that time of year. I can't see it. Anyways, yeah. Probably
good comments coming in, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah,
this is
nice
good.
comment, Peter, on the fly tying last week when I tried to cut my finger off with some scissors and then we super glued it shut. Thanks, Peter,
Zing.
for that. Yeah.
Rob asked about hook size. I believe Ted said 6.
Size 6 is what I like to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And that's that 2457 Scud style heavy TMC hook that we all love.
1120s. That Scud hook's offset a little bit. It's a little bit lighter wire. That might be a little bit better for trout, to use the 1120, but I think you're going to be fine either way.
Splitting hairs then.
Yeah. I usually buy what I can get. So,
and I'll go through and compile a materials list for everyone after, and once I find time, as usual, like anything, right? We'll put it together.
Of it.
Yeah.
Maybe tomorrow with a snowstorm.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a snow day, Brian. You never know.
Down. So when you think about it, for years we were fishing hex for steelhead, and it worked, right? We all know it worked. These bugs get a little active in the winter. And a lot of people don't realize that a hex nymph is usually, a hex when it emerges is 2 years old, so it takes a while. So a lot of times those flies aren't that big when we're fishing them in the winter time. You're fishing around mud, but we definitely fished them a lot, right?
Yes.
So I took this fly, and as we sometimes tinker around, dirty water, what if we tied something with a little bit of flash? And that's what I'm going to show you next, and give you an example before I get cranking on it. So, did that come in okay?
Oh, yeah.
That
looks
really
great.
Good.
Cool. So I'm going to tie that same thing. I'll do it just so I'm a equal opportunity tire. I'll tie this one on 1120.
And it's size 6?
Size 6, yep.
Do you ever do these on like an egg hook? Or do you like that bend?
I like this bend, and I'll get to that in a moment about why I like that bend, especially on the steelhead. So you can tie the eyes in first. You can tie the pheasant tail first, whatever works for you. But essentially, this fly is the. This is,
Just trying to make you feel comfortable.
It's the fly shop I remember working at, man. Yeah. So
Hey, that's my second beer.
that's all right. I'm not being judgmental. I'm envious. I can't tie and drink. I can't tie an egg fly and have a beer. I just can't. So, anyways, we're gonna do the same thing. Basically, start off with that tail, shooting off 2.5 times off the back. Got the eyes mounted there. We're going to come through with some EP fibers. I'm going to go a little bit quicker with this one since you already saw this one time. There's not a major difference.
How many of these do you tie in a winter, Ted?
Probably, just depends on how many I went through the year before, but I'll have
Do you do 12 dozen?
4 to 8 dozen.
4 to 8
I'll
dozen?
usually in my box I'll have I've got a fly box. It's not like the shops here, but those Plano boxes filled with flies. So I just go home and grab what I need.
Yep.
But I'll have maybe 8 dozen. So I'm gonna come in with that tail or that body material to form the tail. It could be a skosh longer. There you go. And I'm going to double back. This time I'm going to not put the gills in. I will get to that reason why in a moment. So if you think about it, we're fishing those hex flies in the spring and in the fall, and we're often fishing them in areas where there aren't really hex.
Right. Well,
But they're catching fish, right? So why mess with the good thing? And I'm not still using it, but now we have a little clearer understanding of why maybe these things are working. Remember that one time I was helping out with down at Schmidt Outfitters? I mean, they were going back 15 years,
long
right?
time ago,
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Oh, let me back it up. I'm using some Estaz pearl olive.
Pearl olive.
Yep.
Stance.
Instead of the ostrich
Is that
pearl.
a small?
That must
or
be the
a
petite.
It's not. No, it's
No?
not the grand. It's the medium.
medium?
This is actually some old inventory of. You could probably use a cactus chenille. That's pretty close. Maybe you can kind of eyeball it, use it as
You
a
could even
reference.
dub it if you needed
Yeah.
to. It looks like
I wouldn't.
no.
I really like that
Uniform.
bugginess. Yeah.
Mhm.
Especially in sunlight.
Ah.
This thing, days where you shouldn't be catching fish, and bright days, gets fish.
That gets fish.
It gets fish.
Do you think it's because it looks more like a salmon fry, or like any of the sucker fry that pop up?
Yeah, I think it
Like
could
a
be a sucker
crossover?
fry. I
Crossover.
actually stay tuned.
Sorry.
Don't
yeah,
mean
yeah,
to-
yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going to come
Time
in with this
traveling
this
here.
hackle feather. So getting back to that story about when we were at Schmidt's, remember that one
Yeah.
morning before we went and grabbed clients, John Gauker, another local area guide,
Another
good
great guide.
Yep.
Talked to him on the phone today.
He came in with a little vial, and he says, "Look at that! We snagged this yesterday, and it was like a sculpin."
Yes.
He goes, "This is what those fish are eating the hex for," and everyone laughed at him and made fun of him, right? Because he was John. That's what everyone did to John. So, but in good humor.
Right.
But he was onto something.
He was definitely.
What
onto
did they
something
eat
there.
it for? So when I put that on there and I come up over the top, tie it between the eye and the mono eyes, advance the thread, bring this back up and over. Do a double whip finish.
Are you whip finishing right over the behind the eyes there?
Yep.
Ted?
Yep.
Okay.
A couple of stray hairs. Are those legs or are those gills? Or are they tech fins?
Right.
Right? So that thicker, bulbous shape that you get from the crystal or the Estas forces those out. It now kind of looks like a peck on a bait fish. And
Hold that up.
this way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yep.
see the similarity.
Yes.
Yes. I feel like we're channeling Kevin Feenstra here with
There's-
the, with
There
the,
is a
with
lot
the
of
bait fish images and
Yeah, so if you talk about that hook in that bend,
Mm-hmm.
when they eat that, it's one of your hardest nymph bites. Because, we're drift fishing, right? You're
Right.
going through, it's not like, is that a fish? And because it's imitating a bait fish, that thing's coming across, they're just not going to mouth it like a nymph coming through. They're going to attack it. So there he is, you hit him, and it's a great fly. It
This
does
is-
work in spring and fall.
This is a fly that my daughter Lily caught her first steelhead on.
This one?
Yep, it's the swimming nymph. I know you had some that I think you had tied some for the shop or something. Somehow I had one in my boat that day, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be really good. And we were over the sand, and it was late in the day, and it literally about ripped the rod out of her hands, and that was the dad moment of, oh, my daughter has a steelhead, and I'm shouting instructions to her, and she's like, don't tell me what to do, Dad, because I know what I'm doing. You've never landed a steelhead in your life, but go ahead. And she lands this beautiful fish, right? And it's on this hex, right? And literally it was one of those grabs, like a swing grab.
It's
And-
pretty noticeable.
So we take some pictures with her hat on. No, I don't like that one. We put the fish back in the net. We're very careful with the fish, and we got the perfect picture. Release the fish, and she's like, "That's awesome. We can go home now." I'm like, we can go home now.
I remember
I
you
haven't even had
texted
to
me
bite
after this day.
She's like,
You're
well, I just needed a
"What the
picture
hell?"
for my Instagram, because all the kids at school think that they follow you at the shop, and they said I've never caught a steelhead. Now I can show them I have.
Yeah.
There you go.
But I can attest to the bite,
There you
because
go. Yeah.
I will never forget. Well, I'm literally chatting with her, and it just about ripped the rod right out of her hands.
And
So it was-
sometimes we need that, don't we?
we do, absolutely.
And that's a good pattern for it. And that's where I like that bend. That bend, this hook,
It stays.
I don't lose too many fish on a scud hook. It's pretty solid. So, and that's why I didn't put the gills on this particular version, right? Because I'm not imitating a hex with this. I call it the sparkle hex. You could probably use this in muddy water. We get those rains in June. You get people, everyone, you know, the once-a-year angler goes out during hex season. They're kicking up mud. Water's dirty. Why not throw that out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a transformer.
Yeah. And what I did, again, with that theme of let's tie some flies that we can use for different things in different situations, I took that same fly, I bumped it up a little bit, I've tied it. I don't even know if they make these anymore. I'm kind of a hook junkie.
Yeah.
TMC 760 TC, the tournament.
Oh, I don't think they make
yeah.
those
These
anymore.
things, they've got a point. I'm going to put it in the vise, and I don't know if you can zoom in. I'll hold
We're
it.
pretty
Can
zoomed
you see
in.
that point? How is it? Chisel point?
Yeah.
Man, careful tying with those. They are sharp. But anyways, that's kind of a straight, more of an oversized wet fly hook. Tied the same thing on, a little bit bigger. I did some black bead chain on the underside, and I put some lead wire in there.
Ah.
So why not throw that as a little bait fish imitation, either on a floating line or on a intermediate tip? But how about that as a super low water smallmouth fly?
Absolutely. No, that would totally.
Or if you got a guy who can cast two flies, tandem.
Oh, yeah.
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 So basically it's that same fly, but we can kind of bump it up, switch it up a little bit, add some lead and so forth. So
Ted, you have a shout out from one of your customers, Mike Lobel.
oh, hey
I
Mike.
told you he was gonna tune in tonight, and he was late. He had to rescue a snowcat out in West Yellowstone. So, that's what he does all winter. He guides, great guides. So if those of you out there that are looking for a guide in West Yellowstone, get a hold of Mike
And his wife.
and his wife Alice.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We just did a trip to Cuba with them.
I wanted to back this up too on that original Hex Nymph. Here's a Hex Nymph. A lot of people have never seen one, right? So, see how we got the definite light, dark in the gills?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're kind of going for with that guy. So, that's kind of the reasoning behind what we're tying. So, I kind of stumbled into that imitating a bait fish. You know, a lot of times, if there's anything I've learned after 18 years of guiding, fishing longer, is how much I don't know.
Right.
As soon as I
learn
think
every
I
day.
got something figured out, I learned, well, you
Yeah.
kind of had it figured out, but for the wrong reasons, or you just got lucky or whatever. So
Right. You're just
we're
embracing
humbled.
embrace that learning mentality when you're on the water. And that's something we harp on all the time. Like,
Always be learning.
Yeah.
none of us, I mean, I don't know. I like that about our shop. We'll tell you, hey, we don't know everything, but we probably know someone who does, right?
We're not afraid to ask. And you know what? That's
Yeah.
the thing. Don't be afraid to ask questions. We don't, nobody has all the answers. What do these things imitate?
Right. That's
And-
one of my favorite parts about being at the shop is I have all these people and I can utilize all their years of experience here, and
Absolutely.
it's fun. Looks like Ted's organizing up a
Really
storm over there.
organized. He's I like the pictures.
The-
We'll have to put up those pictures too in conjunction with the flies, I think.
Yeah. Hopefully nothing weird slips into the photos or,
I don't think anything. It's Ted.
Good thing Brian doesn't know how to use Photoshop. That's all I'm gonna say.
What do you mean I don't know how to use Photoshop? How do you think I
Uh-oh.
get all those pictures for my, Instagram with big fish? I can't catch those.
So, any other questions from the audience or anything on that fly or how we
I
tied
mean,
it? Or-
do you want to talk real quick while you're doing that about how you fish that fly rig-wise usually?
Yeah.
I think that's
so,
super helpful for folks.
when I'm using the second one I showed you, the Sparkle Hex, I'm using that typically on a duck and chuck rig, drift fishing for steelhead. But I'll use it on an intermediate tip or a floating line, the smaller one, tied more as a streamer.
Okay.
And for the trout fishing, but you can also hang that off something bigger for smallmouth.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to bring up smaller flies for smallmouth. I think, it's interesting to see the trend of trout streamers has has about faced. You know, we're starting to shrink things down a little bit, right? And
it became
I feel
an arms
like
race
we're
on
getting
how much
very
stuff
much
we
so.
could put on a fly. How could we throw it? You know, and triple articulation with rubber legs.
Oh yeah, big stuff. And
Yeah.
I feel like we're almost there with smallmouth too. I think we've seen some just wonderfully tied, beautiful big flies, and they're so much fun because you can visualize them, you can see them in the water, and you can see the eat. But I think sometimes we try and force that big fly even when we have low clear water, and a small little crayfish or a small little bait fish is the answer to save your day.
So I've said this in the past. I think, you know, when we're streamer fishing, Ted, you and I have done this, Matt, you and I have done this, where we fish a bigger fly in the front, and then we fish something really small and natural like this off the back of that hook. And I can't tell you how many times, even those tiny little like foxy fries, I've caught so many big, like plus 20 fish on those. You know, they move to that big fish. You know, the big fly.
It's the enticer, right?
And
is
then
the
they
big one
see
that gets
this
their
little
attention.
Natural one that they've never maybe seen before, and they eat it. And you're like, oh my goodness, that is the biggest fish I've ever seen. I hope that hook holds. But I can see the same thing being true with this, especially when those, you know, hex flies or wigglers are moving around, and they get active towards that, you know, June time frame. And we might have a dirty day where we're throwing some smaller streamers. I think this would be super effective.
I think you can also fish that, you know, the true classic nymph, hang that underneath the stonefly, because as you're fishing a stonefly, you're not dead drifting it. You're kind of stripping it, kind of twitching it across the surface, kind of skating it it a little bit. And if that thing's hanging below, you're kind of getting that swimming action.
I love the whole double trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's trouble though sometimes. So you gotta, you know,
Just wear your safety glasses, pick your spots, because not every spot you can comfortably cast two flies either.
No.
True.
Right. I mean, if you're really trying to, if fish are holding really tight to the bank, that's probably not the program. Right. If fish are, you know, maybe sitting off the bank a little bit, you can show them two flies. You know, it's all situational, like anything.
Absolutely.
So.
Fish the center of the river, man. Those fish know not to be on the banks anymore, right?
I know.
So that's.
I know. We all own boats, right? So.
Yeah. And if you think about it, when you're in a boat, you shouldn't be fishing to the sides. You can get that thing down, and then you've got room. If you're casting downstream, you've actually got room for a back cast.
Right.
Even if you got trees, you're throwing it up the river channel, so you have more room. You can really reach out and get it further away from the boat. So.
And you can manage your drift so well from that position in a boat. You have so much control of the drift.
Yeah. So. Well, you know, you brought up the smaller streamer thing, and oddly enough, that's kind of where we're going.
What?
Imagine
that.
No
way. That was not queued up, guys.
The funny thing is, you guys...
We got some good lead-ins here.
We did not. We had no idea what Ted was going to tie before
going in
tonight,
blind.
So we definitely came in blind to this, and he kept us in the dark, which is always fun. You know, it's a Scooby-Doo mystery.
Here's what we're tying next. It's kind of a unique pattern that I can't claim to just ingeniously come up with it. I was tying actually one of those streamers that I was saying that we're not using as much anymore. I was coming up with an idea for a tandem streamer, and I tied the rear half. For some reason, I took the rear half and I threw it off to the side, and I was doing something else. And then I looked over at it out of the corner of my eye. I said, wow, that really kind of looks like a cool pattern. And this is actually it. It's been actually on my desk for like, I think 3 years now. So I've been fishing this for about 3 years. So this was going to be the back half of a big streamer, which actually turned into this. You can kind of see the resemblance. And what this does is imitates another bait fish pattern. I actually put this on my website back just before Christmas. So the 3 people who have actually been to my website and have seen it, this is nothing new for you. But we are tying a little bit different variation. And this one does not have a bead on it. Okay, so one of the good things about being a fly tyer is we're not stuck with one pattern. I can put a bead on here, brass bead. I can put a tungsten bead that can get it down a little bit further. I can put lead. I actually have some of these tied with a cone. I don't know if you can see that. There's a cone buried in there.
Oh yeah,
kind of like a dirty
in the underbody
style.
behind the behind the deer hair.
flare out the deer hair, but it also gives it some weight. But that's the advantage we have as fly tires, is we can make those changes. So if we get to the river and we're finding that the fish are a little bit deeper, instead of throwing maybe a bigger, heavier sink tip, but we need a fly that maybe sinks a little bit more, we've got a fly that weighs
Sure.
more and get down. So,
And we see that with the low clear water we've had the past few years.
yep, and that's kind of the cool part about this one. Now this does have a little bit of a lead underwire. So I'm just going to start cranking if that's good by you. And we're using a Gamakatsu B10S in a size 6 light wire. It's absolutely fine for smallmouth and trout. If you have a steelhead hook onto it, a summer run while you're fishing for smallmouth. I mean, those things are so hard to land anyways, but especially on like 6 or a 7 weight. But on that hook, it might be a little light. But again, we're not really fishing this for steelhead. This is more of a smallmouth, more trout. But don't hesitate fishing it in a lake. Okay.
Good call.
All right. I'm gonna just use that same thread that I used to tie up the rear of that hex. It's the Flymaster Plus. And lay down a pretty good base. I'm going to put some 030 lead. And I don't know, a lot of people don't realize that these scissors, these little iris scissors, have these little shoulders on them right here. And those serve as wire cutters, so we don't ruin our blade. So we can notch that off and keep the integrity. I'm just going to put some lead right up behind, not right up behind the eye, but kind of close. Not going to take that all the way back. That's about good. And that's basically going to help me offset the flotation that deer hair is going to provide. So once I've got that in there, I'm going to use some extra select craft fur. And I'm not grabbing too much.
I'm going to take a guess at the color. Is that sand?
Tan?
It's tan.
Cream?
I think
sand.
I think it's sand.
I've got it written down somewhere.
We're going to fight about this later.
Yep.
We play a memory game. When we sticker
varies,
stuff,
man.
like I flip them all over and see if I can memorize them all. So
Yeah. I've got a pretty good sized chunk here. What I'm going to do, watch closely, this has too long of a fiber. We're going to get to that later. So I'm going to remove those real long ones. And then, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. As far as thickness, if I draw it snug, it's kind of hard to say. You just, like anything that you do tying, your first couple you're going to throw out until you get it nailed down, right?
Yep.
I even do that with flies. I'm going to remove the shorties, throw those off to the side. Don't get rid of them. And I'm going to come in here and drop that about 2.5 times the total hook length off the back. Actually, I'm going to trim that off, save it. Just tie that right in.
Waste not, want not.
No.
I like how you trim that right so it would butt up against the wire there.
Yep.
You didn't have to, and that's one of those things. Like it's you tie enough of these, it's one of those unspoken. You don't even think about little tips,
Little efficiencies that now I don't have to go there and try to cut
exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Butts right
It
up against the
cleans it
wire.
up.
That first wrap is kind of loose, just a gathering wrap, and then you can start cinching down. Yeah. It's just fun watching other people do it when I can, when you can tune into it. So
Again, save that stuff that you cut. We're going to come in with some olive now, or golden olive, and I'm going to get rid of the tips. This stuff I can get rid of. I don't need this. I'm going to get rid of the shorties, and then I'm going to lay that right up on top, so it's about the same length. And basically make it two-tone. Almost all bait fish are two-tone, dark on top. Helps with their camouflage. Just tie that in, and that's resting right up on top there.
Oh, that's really good looking.
Yeah. So there's the 1, 2. Also, when I tie, just kind of give you a note if it's not completely in focus for you. I'm trying to see the fly. I want this thing square to me. That's why it's not like this. But if you do tie like that, you got to make sure that you're not favoring one side and you're getting good wraps. So always be sure to check it out. Okay.
Another benefit of a rotary vise.
Yeah, I usually don't spin flies, the rotary, but I use it for all sorts of movement. All right, I don't think this is anything new to us. This is the cool guy strips, right? One strand of this stuff does a lot. A little dab will do ya.
If anyone's wondering, I know just from looking, that's 1/69th opal lateral scale.
Yeah.
Because I'm a material nerd. So.
Geek.
And if you're like me,
A cool guy like Ted said, hey, come on.
I thought it might be chartreuse opal.
No, that is coming in like 5 colors now.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
in case you guys didn't know and you really like it,
I
there's
do.
5 colors of this stuff.
I'm a big fan.
This stuff can get a little wild on you, and if it's not, it's not cheap. I don't know if you noticed what I do with my crystal or my flash
Another
glues and stuff.
pro
I cut a
tip.
little package, a little slit in there, and I can just pull out as much as I need. Now, if I was Kevin Feenstra, no offense, he just grabs a handful of it. I don't use quite as much.
All right.
So, what I'm going to do is tie this in one side up over the other, and basically the same length as the end of the tips. I don't really want it much longer.
Ooh, that looks really good.
And I'm late to the whole flash thing. I've always liked flash, but I'm not always super flashy. You talk about streamer fishing, right? There are days where the fish will eat those big flies and they go after it, right? Doesn't matter what you're throwing. But those
We all
days are
dream about
limited.
those days.
Those days are limited.
But they're
They
not
are.
every day.
If we think about it, back in the day when there weren't many people streamer fishing, we still had those days where the fish didn't do it. But we had the advantage of they didn't have streamer fatigue, or what I call streamer fatigue. So I kind of tend to
Go more
with the natural stuff. So they don't even have a scale for this 1/69ths or whatever. This is
The
wing and flash,
Oh.
super sparse.
Oh, I know that label.
Yeah, that's an old one. And I'm gonna pull a little bit out, right? Not much. I don't know if that's coming in focus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just gonna lay that so it's about the same length. If you pull on this stuff, it is like Mylar base. It will stretch, so you don't want to pull on it. And we're gonna kind of stagger cut it, and we're done.
Little note, just on the acquisition side, wing and flash is a little bit tougher to get a hold of nowadays. Ice wing is a little bit easier if you want an alternative, or something like Ripple Ice is a little bit more prevalent as well. But Ted's smart to keep that in the package, because that stuff,
Once it comes out,
oh
you're
my
never
gosh,
getting it back.
forget
It
about
is.
it.
Yep.
It's bonkers. At least wing and flash comes with a zip tie on it, whereas ice wing fiber is just, ooh,
And ice wing's a little thicker too.
yeah.
It's a little coarser.
It's nice to have those really thin fibers. They move so well in the current.
Exactly. So remember that excess craft fur we had? We're gonna actually make a dubbing out of it. We're just gonna take it and just kind of mix it up, and
Ooh.
yeah, there's our dubbing. If you use wax, now's a good time to put a little wax on there. I'm not a wax guy, and I'm just gonna build up a base.
Just on your mustache, or?
I'm just gonna come in. I usually use a little bit of a little slobber.
Slobber's
A
the
little
best.
slobber, man. Hey, Mom used it for everything. Fixed everything, cleaned you up.
Cleaned you up.
Yep.
Let your hair down.
Yep.
Get
But
the dirt off your face.
I'm also a simplist. I try not to grab too many tools, so what I do is I use my scissors and I just pick away at it, kind of thicken it up, beef it up, and we're good. Now
Oh,
we're going to
that's
come
good.
back through with some more of that olive. We're going to clean it up, get rid of the long ones, get rid of the shorter ones. Not as much of the shorter ones because we want a little bit more bulk here. And I'm going to lay that in so it's not the same length, but we're kind of forming that minnow profile, or that bait fish profile. Come up on top, cinch it, and we're good. Okay.
That's a great tip. If you have everything come to the exact same length, it doesn't always build that profile you want. You want to, stagger the tips forward as you move forward and build the
Layer
bulk
it
towards
in.
the the front of the hook there.
Yeah, like those musky flies are a great example of
it's,
that, right?
yeah, it's the best visualization of
taper.
that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Or the game changers.
Yeah.
Smaller. Deer hair. You guys remember using deer hair? Nobody uses deer hair anymore. So this is deer body hair. And the reason deer body, you want it long. You want it pretty decent, right? What, higher, this one?
Yep.
There you
Okay.
go. Winner.
Yep.
Primo
Thanks.
strip.
Primo strips
Or
are the
did
way
you
to
shoot
go.
that one?
No, this is a Primo strip. Purchased here. I'm going to cut off a good sized chunk. Not
You're talking thickness of a pencil?
But exactly, not much more than a pencil. I'm gonna get rid of the short. I should probably show you guys how to do that if you're not familiar with it. I grab it by the tips. I remove all the underfur and short hairs. It's not that important because this isn't a dry fly. But once I've got that, got the static clean going, I'm going to use an evener. I love this big Griffin evener.
That's the serious one.
Yeah.
That's for
Like-
serious jobs.
It's not super important that every fiber is perfect, but pretty close to it. Push it out. And what I'm going to do here is lay this in, because this not only gives us the peck fins, but the tips of these work as an anti-foul to keep that loose hair from coming up around the bend of the hook. Okay? So I'm just going to come in and basically encompass it. I push it so that the hook shank is in the center of that deer hair. Change hands. I'm just going to take this thread and wrap up right on top with real loose wraps. I get 3 or 4, and I'm going to get a little tighter, and I'm going to actually feel it go right up around that hook. I'm going to wind it through and pull that. Hopefully you can see that okay. Pull that back. Need a little bit of space. And there's the hook eye, and come back and whip finish it, pull all those fibers back.
Ted, you made that look exceptionally easy.
That was super smooth. Nice work.
Let's see if I can do it twice. And done. Another thing is use your hand on your vise and put your finger on your hand that's solid, and gives you a lot better, when you're trimming stuff. I think sometimes that doesn't.
That's a
not always
great
out
tip.
there.
Yeah, if you
You go in like this, man.
don't
you're gonna
look
cut
too
the wrong
close
thing.
at my videos. I'll just be like, but then you brace it and it just
Yeah, just
come in
hand here,
smooth
hand
and
you
trim
can
it.
trim.
Yeah.
Yep. So now I'm going to shape this head, and this is something that, man, I struggled with it for years and years and years and years. But now
I think
I've got it
everybody
down.
does. You get
Yeah.
to this point,
Yeah.
and it's deer hair, right? Everybody freaks out.
Yeah. And the cool thing about deer hair is if you do mess it up, it's real easy to shave that off with the razor blade and retie it. You don't have to start completely over. So, box of single blade razors goes a long ways. But how I address deer hair, right, wrong, or indifferent, but how I do it is I use it in 2-dimension. Right, I come at it, and first I usually come right up underneath, and I want to make sure I leave those guard hairs. So I'm just going to come up and cut flat. I'm going to come up on top, and I'm going to cut a little bit of an angle. You see how I've got that sloop up? I'm going to come up here, and we're going to cut on an angle. And we're going to take that without cutting the natural tips. We're just cutting the butts. Okay? And once we've got that, that's kind of what it looks like. So now we're going to come at it in this angle, and then what I do is I square up to it, and I look, and I'm cutting it at an angle. And then at an angle. And it is deer hairs. There's usually a couple of wild ones, so you need to go through and clean that up. And yeah, we're there.
Oh, that looks beautiful.
Come in and put a little bit of a flat spot because, as I talked about earlier, I want to talk about eyes, right? I've got all this time invested. It wasn't that long, right? But pride of ownership. I think when it comes to bait fish, and especially those smaller ones, those fish they're not hammering it, but they're looking at it. They're inquisitive and they're inspecting it. So I'm going to actually try to make it look a little more realistic, and I'm going to use some eyes.
So you're of the camp that I agree with this too. Like, I think eyes give it a big target. Like, some people are like, "Oh, don't waste your time with eyes." But for me, if I'm going to spend the time to tie a fly, right? I want it to look finished.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So I like to add an eye to my fly.
I mean,
doesn't take
we have
long,
a whole
right?
we have a whole thing. I mean, we have a whole video about
do.
eyes Joe and I debating about eyes on flies, and I think it's situational for me. But I can't deny how good a fly looks with well-applied eyes. You
I
cannot
agree.
deny it. It just looks
to me,
good.
It's pride, right? Now, if I was tying, and I like tying flies, but I hate tying flies the night before a fishing trip.
Sure.
So I'm tying all winter. I don't have a gun in my head. I don't have to do it, right? So I can take the time and put on eyes.
Yeah.
And usually when I'm doing eyes, what I'll do is I'll tie, let's say I tie a dozen of these. I'll tie a dozen of them, then I'll come back and do all the eyes at once. It makes it more of a process. Plus I get away from the fumes of this stuff. There's all sorts of different things that we can use. I have found this. Russ and Kestner, when they owned the Troutsman, turned me onto this. I've used this stuff forever. I use this stuff around the house. Brian, we used to get it. Is that good?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Super
The
fabric
fabric.
adhesive.
Yep.
I call it liquid duct tape. I use it around the house. I put felt pads underneath the chairs, things like that. Stuff's awesome. After about 2 or 3 years, it starts to yellow. This is starting to yellow, but I've put a lot of eyes on it, right? And I don't think the fish are going to see the yellow in the eyes.
Will you do me a favor, Ted? Will
Yeah.
you hold that right up where the fly is? Perfect.
Yep.
Super fabric adhesive. Yeah.
And we carry the same.
What I would equate that to is liquid fusion today.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm a huge fan of liquid fusion for eyes because it doesn't dry brittle.
This stuff is
it
flexible.
dries
Yep.
flexible, and that's huge if you want your eyes to last, even beyond casting. I mean, you want it to be flexible. It doesn't dry right away. It's not that instant gratification like
Yeah.
super glue gives you,
Yeah.
but it's worth it. So
I've actually had the eyes stay on, but the epoxy, the 3D part mold, fall off of the fly.
Wow.
But what's attached to the fly is actually there. And what's also cool, and then it doesn't matter what we're using, it also helps kind of bind that head together, keep the materials, and make it more durable. So for those that say it takes too long, Brian, you got your phone, you do a little stopwatch. You want to see how long this takes to put eyes on?
Absolutely.
It's not a big deal.
It's not a big deal. Let's see.
I usually use a piece of paper just to collect. I usually don't have to squeeze this stuff. Once I open it up, enough of it falls off and just kind of comes out of the tube. I use a bodkin, and I just apply a little dab. A little dab will do ya. On one side, a little dab on the other side. I'm using some 4.5 millimeter gold eyes, just kind of going with the theme of this gold. Pick it up with my bodkin, touch it. I use the back of the bodkin, push it on there. I'm not worried about it being 100% perfect just yet. Flip it around, come in. I got cocky and was talking, it was easy. All right.
but that's the great thing about this being not super glue, not to, narrate over you, but you have time to work with these a little bit slower cure adhesives.
Totally.
Because you can set it.
Can you see how those eyes are all
Nice.
matched?
Yep.
You're done. Brian, how
All
long
right.
did it take to put eyes on?
51.7 seconds.
All right. It's a no-brainer.
That's a
Yeah.
NASCAR turn.
The other thing we can do with this is, kind of forgot, we can come in and put the bar marks because, bait fish have bar marks. I'm using a metallic gold Sharpie, and I come up from the bottom up, bottom up, bottom up. I'm kind of a 3 on this guy. And I can see through where I did the marks on the other side and kind of put the color. And I usually hit a little bit harder on the top around the olive. And
Oh, that looks super good. What do you call this one? Ted?
I just called a back half bait fish because it
Oh,
was the
yeah.
back half of that streamer that I never did tie.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
super awesome. Now, do you fish with a sink tip or intermediate, or what are your preferences on this one?
Mostly I'm fishing it with an intermediate or a super slow sink. Floating lines too. If I'm fishing trout and I'm fishing in the summertime and I'm fishing shallower water, there's a lot of fish hanging out kind of just off those little shelves where it's maybe 18, 24, 30 inches deep. There's a piece of wood and you get a fish that will lay there. Not always the biggest fish, but nice fish. You throw that up in there, it gets down enough even with the bead on a this fly tied with a bead. And again, you can see that on my website how to do that.
Hey, Ted, when you say intermediate, I think the intermediate for trout is something a lot of anglers do not have experience with or play with. I mean, and that's, for better or worse, that's a little bit of the marketing machine, is to sell depth. You need to achieve, maximum depth. For intermediate lines, are you running an intermediate tip line, or are you running something like a poly leader or a versa leader or the sonar leader from SA?
I like the personally. I like the sink tip. They're anywhere from like 9 to 12 feet, depending on manufacturers and so forth.
Sure.
The cool thing I like about it's not a big fly, it's not a heavy fly, but it's wind resistant. And the cool thing about intermediate lines is the mass that it has, and it helps carry it.
Right.
So it might not be the best caster or a windy day. It can get a fly out there better. But once you get the cast, it just sinks enough and gets it down. You're not going to hang it up like with a sink tip.
No.
And when you throw a sink tip, especially, we're not fishing sink tips on trout in July and August for the most part, right?
No.
It's going to spook fish.
Yep.
So it's a little bit kindler, gentler. But again, it's also where I'm targeting. I'm not going in, this fly on an intermediate is not going to catch a fish out of one of those 4-foot deep, fast-moving bends, right? But when the river's not busy, as it isn't that time of year, especially in the mornings before any canoers or kayaks, we'll saw those insides, man. That's where the fish are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I fish a lot of the, you talked about this as a good smallmouth crossover, right? And,
Totally.
And I totally see that because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I love the pause, the smallmouth pause, and just let it, strip it and let it die and float and suspend. And the intermediate's perfect for that, which is, I think a good way into that, if you are not looking to maybe do a whole new line, is like the sonar leaders or the poly leaders from Airflow, or the
I use those
first
with
leaders.
like the outbound short or the Titan
it's
tapers.
so much fun.
And put
Yeah.
one of those poly leaders.
It's
on
very
there.
versatile. It's crossover, just like your fly.
Yeah.
It makes your floating line super versatile, and we have low clear water. We're gonna have low clear water this year, even though we're watching the snowstorm.
We're watching the
right
snowstorm,
now.
like, yep, we're
But
still
it's
have
gonna
low, clear
happen.
water.
We know that. So
The other cool thing about those lines, a lot of people don't realize it. When you're fishing a lake, it helps you get down a little bit more. But when you're fishing I love like the old Whitlock diving frogs and swimming frogs,
Yeah.
bait fish. If you throw that out there, that thing's floating like this. You let it sit, that clear tip sinks a little bit, and you got to pause, and the hard part's waiting.
Oh, it's so
But you're
tough.
right off that drop in the weed line. That thing goes down, waits, but it's not spooking fish because it's clear. And they usually focus in on that. And we're talking mostly largemouth, but smallmouth too, pike. You pull that down, that thing goes bloom, and it just sends all those bubbles down, and those rubber legs are
It's a dinner bell.
kicking. Those 6 hackles are going everywhere. And then it just slowly comes up, and they can't help themselves on that slow come up. Bam. So it's not a line. It's a versatile line. You can use it for more than just trout, and you can use it for more than just smallmouth.
Yeah.
And I actually took the pattern. I brought the box. It's got some tying to do. But I can tie it in different colors. Why not tie it in a bait fish? And this is one with a bead.
Yeah.
You can see it
Here,
okay?
hold it right at the
Can you
vise
hold
there.
the box up by the? There you go.
Is that?
It looks organized. That's nice.
I've been accused of being organized.
Oh, look, you have a label maker. It says back half.
Yeah. Here, yellow with a hot spot. All I did was take some. That's a used one there.
We hold that right at the vise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll pop it out. Give him the boot. Kind of the same
Ooh,
fly.
I like
Now
that
we're
one.
talking.
But now I threw a little bit of
Now
hot
we're
spot,
talking.
right?
Yeah. I like
A
that.
little ice stub in there.
So you can really. This is another foundation fly, right? You can
Tie
mix
it
up the
much
back
different
half
ways,
colors.
Different colors. Supernatural, right? But we know that smallmouth aren't always into the natural. They kind of like colors. So, boom. It's
Oh,
good
they
enough.
love color. I think
Yeah.
one of my favorite flies is kind of this watermelony, kind of crazy colored fly in the middle of the summer, and you can play the game of what can I get away with smallmouth sometimes.
Well, it's kind of fun too to kind of test what are they eating? After we're out with clients, right? You catch some fish, like, well, is it the day, is the client, or am I really that good? Well, we know it's not necessarily the latter, but we can play around, right?
Right. It gives us a little freedom to play around.
Yeah, and too many times, we're all guilty of it. When do we test new ideas? When fishing's tough.
We should test
Have the hoot spot and try it when the fish are biting, because when the fish aren't biting, when they're biting everything else, you can get rid of that fly or that presentation that's not working.
Right.
But you gotta get out of that comfort zone of, man, we're knocking the bejesus out of them. Let's keep it up. So,
perfect.
Anyways, that's that pattern. Back half minnow. And like you talked about, Matt, like that pause in the current, they can't help themselves as that tail.
That's great.
Kinda, because a lot of times the waters we fish for smallmouth's not ripping, right?
No.
So you get that.
You want it to move and flutter and
because
tickle.
those smallmouth come up behind it and they look, and that thing's going like, oh shit, boom. That's
Boom.
when you get the whack. So it's that pause.
Yeah.
So, all right. Sorry for that. But before I get rid of those, I'll show you just another picture. I showed it to you before. What we're trying to imitate there. I think I threw it in the other box.
I did leave the overhead projector at home for your slides, but
So, before I put that away, let me just show you. Yeah, that's the one I just tied. Is that?
That's great. Oh, geez. Look at that match.
Notice a resemblance?
Little bit. Yeah.
Is that the wood perch? What is that?
Log perch. Yeah.
Log perch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty, and you could see where you could scale it up a little bit more with some yellow.
Sure.
Have you swung that in the fall?
I have not.
Boy, I think in the low clear, like that natural looking, I think that would swing really well. Like that pattern with, I don't know. I think that would be a killer. I'm going to try that. I'll let you know.
All right, report back.
I'll report back.
I've never used any of these flies. I'm just hoping guys will tie them, use them, and report back. They work great, man. Thanks. All right. So we got time for another one? We doing okay?
Yeah. We got time. I mean, everybody's hanging on. I mean, this is a little bit longer one, but I'm having a blast. I think everybody's hunkered down at home during this. It's whipping out there. We've seen the plow go by like 5 times here. Why not? Why not? This is good. If everybody has a snow day tomorrow, maybe you can experiment with some of this stuff, right? So
tie flies. I'm gonna change vise.
How many vices do you have, Ted?
Fly time?
Just in general. What are your favorite vices?
This is an old Renzetti 4000. I've had it since maybe 1998. I've tied a couple flies on it. Right. I've replaced the jaws once. If anyone has one of these, this is the old screw style. If anyone has one of these and they find a little slipping, you can buy new jaws for it. Recently, I took mine apart and I took an old hook file and just roughed it up a little bit. It was new again. So, if you're having some slippage, that might help you out. Oh, I messed up the cinematographer. While you're dialing that in, I will pull this stuff out.
Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight.
Just don't hit 3.
No, this is my last.
We do
fly.
have fun doing these, and
the buttons number 3.
it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of work. Matt does a great job, so I want to give a shout out to Matt Hartman. He's our shop manager here and our production coordinator for everything.
Club president.
He is AV Club president. Does all of our website, social media stuff. So big shout out to Matt. He rocks it out.
Should mention maybe the podcast.
We just dropped a
Monday.
podcast. We kicked it out on Monday. We were recorded with the guys at Mangle Fly, Johnny Ray and Ed McCoy. Check it out. It's on Dynamo. Kind of a serious issue we have going on here in Michigan, and we're trying to create awareness. We want to work with the DNR to get the word out and help mitigate the spread of that terrible situation we have going. It displaces a lot of the trout, but I think that's why we're all focused a little bit more on bass and some warm water stuff these days. I know Ted and I have had that discussion, and we're having fun with it. So it's fun and exciting to learn new waters.
And you get to do it in daylight.
Yeah, we don't have to do it at night. That's such a good point. So, Matt is getting the new cameras set up, and I think he has it going.
All right. Well, this is another fly that I'm kind of bumping it up in size here. This is one that actually Rainey's has. It's called a nice mullet, and this is what it looks like. I'll throw it in the vise. Matt, is that all focused and
There we go.
copacetic?
Looks great.
Looks good. All right. So a little bit larger bait fish pattern. Not a real hard stripping fly. A lot of guys have been using this in saltwater.
This is
Definitely
a
tied on a different
great
hook.
Saltwater fly.
Different hook. Tarpon. Bluefish guys, I guess. I've never fished for bluefish. Bluefish guys have used it, and there's some other I mean, you think about how diverse the ocean is. There's fish in there I've never heard of, but supposedly it's working for that too. But this is more of a smallmouth and pike, because it really looks, this color anyways, it really looks like a goby. Gobies are definitely prolific. Give me a second here.
I can't believe how many gobies there are, like out in the bay, compared to what they used to be. You know, doing the different field trips with the kids and looking at the inland seas data that they have collected over the years. It's absolutely amazing. You know, went from 0 gobies to like that's all they gather. It's crazy.
Wow.
So what a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah, I mean, carp eat them. So
Everything
carp
eats
fly,
'em.
yeah. Lakes, obviously,
Steelhead,
lake
lake
trout. You
trout.
know, we don't real fish for lake trout, but you know, the lake trout charter boats. let's
Absolutely.
turn that fishery around to kind of fill the void of what's happened to the salmon and a lot of the waters. So yeah,
Look
they're
at Lake Huron,
Yeah.
savior over there with all the smallmouth and walleye.
for sure. This fly we're doing on a lot of people may not have seen this. I remember showing you guys this last year. It is the Gamakatsu B10S. It's the TWG, which is tournament wire grade, and it's the nano coat. What does that mean? It's a little bit thinner wire, and when you start getting into like the 2s and 4s, if the thickness of the metal's too much on a B10S, this solves that problem. It's a little bit thinner, and it's super, 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 super silky, which kind of poses a problem, but I'll show you.
Kind
a
of like the
workaround.
Arex.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with a thread base, and this is a real lousy combination. This, waxy Flymaster Plus on top of that hook. It's
Spinny.
spinny. But again, I'll show you how to fix that. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of the bead chain eyes in black, the extra large. What I like about it is it gives me some weight, but not as much weight as a dumbbell eyes. Let's face it, one of the most dangerous thing we do as guides is tie on a Clouser minnow with lead eyes, man. I mean,
You're gonna wear it.
and there's nothing hurts more because there's nothing to protect you. I mean, that thing it comes in hot. Sometimes
That's the sound that I hear it.
you hear before impact. Yeah.
Whap.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll be coming home. There's one customer I won't even bring a box. I come home like this.
Yeah, you flinch.
Jeannie's like, "Oh, you're fishing with so and so today." Yeah, it was. Yeah. So, they come in low and hot. So, bead chain. So to get back on track, bead chain helps with that. The other cool thing about the black bead chain is it gives you that solid pupil that we were talking about as far as eyes. So
Gives you a target.
yeah, and I want to talk to you too a little bit about bead chain. A lot of people just cut at bead chain, and that's not always good. I use some small side cutters, and what I do is I hang it vertically. You see that okay, Matt?
Yeah, it looks
Okay.
great.
I come right up underneath there and cut it real tight to the ball. The reason why is you've got that connector, that vertical, and if you just cut at it, that thing will come out, and through fishing, it can nick your line.
can
It's
nick it.
super sharp.
There are enough sharp edges on this. No offense, I'm not a big fan of what they call the hammerhead, which is running a double. Because
Yep.
a bad cast, that tippet can actually
Wrap around it.
wrap around like a hitch. And not only will the fly not swim right, but you've got a weak spot if you hook a fish. So I get the weight by going with a little bit larger size. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to lay that right up on top, and then I slide it under and just kind of do some figure eights. And yeah. And I'm going to come back here, and I'm basically right up above the point. Here's some old school stuff.
Oh, Mason.
You still make it, but man, that packaging
It's really
is
hard to
awesome,
find.
man. It's like
Tough to get.
1958.
Yeah.
Otisville, Michigan, man. It's still made right here. This is 20 pound. You could probably get away with 16. 16 pounds, kind of the common as far as people using it for weed guards on bass flies.
Looks like you're using those wire cutters again.
Yeah, it's heavy. It's hard mason, man.
Yeah.
It's
With
heavy.
all of my weed guards and stuff, I just keep my wire snips at the desk for that.
Yeah. And I'm just going to tie that in right at the very back. And to see how that has a natural curve to it, that's what we want. We want that curve going up.
Like a Kogel's hot dog.
Yep.
Serve the curve.
I bought Jeannie a t-shirt. They had t-shirts, man. She wears it when we go camping just to humor me. Yeah.
Love it.
Yep. All right. So
I'm sorry.
I knew it.
That's going to be the name of this one for
Yeah,
sure. If this
yeah.
was a podcast, it'd be called Serve the Curve.
Serve the curve. Now this is called the nice mullet. What I'm going to do.
Also good.
Yeah. Remember those mullets we saw at Tippy
Oh my
last spring? Man, we should put that on the. We might offend somebody. Those things were world class.
Those
There
were
like
great.
3 of them.
Oh,
Yeah.
They were working hard
John
for that.
List took that picture.
Sitting on the
That was
sitting on the
awesome.
bench. That was great.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to come through with some of that super glue and just basically do 2 drops and then a drop over the eyes. And what that is really going to help out with is give me a better foundation on that slippery B10S
Nice.
with that nano. Yeah, otherwise it'll just slide around. And while that's drying, I'm going to show you guys how to make some zonker strips.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
But kind of something different. Remember Craft Hair came out with their extra select stuff back maybe 2004? That was pretty cool stuff, man.
Yeah.
It was longer. And that stuff, man, has only gotten better. It's almost like it's genetically improved, right? And it's to the point where, look how long that is. And
It's
silky.
long stuff.
Yeah. That's not going to work for what I want. So I had to kind of go to the craft shop. In my case, I had some stash. Look at this. See how that's a little shorter or a lot shorter?
Yes.
That's what we want. I don't know if you can pick this up, Matt, on a
Pet the fuzzy wall.
I'm going to try.
no, as far as the camera.
Oh.
What I'm going to do,
I can.
come over. And,
I'm going to have to.
yeah, sorry.
We're going to get creative.
I'm high maintenance.
Sorry if anybody gets motion sickness doing this.
I've got an X-Acto blade and a straight edge.
You on 2?
You're on 2.
Stay on 2.
I'm staying right here.
I can't believe you're letting me have the controls of the panel here, Matt. This is like, I'm thrilled.
Got it, dude?
Ooh, yeah, that looks good.
Making you work. This kind of has a natural grid to it, this backing, so we can use that as a lineup. And I'm going to basically go about 5/16 of an inch. If you go much narrower than that, it kind of loses its rigidity. Too wide, and it's simply too wide for this fly. So about 5/16, I'm going to take a nice sharp razor X-Acto. And I don't want to push too hard. You can actually hear it. If I push too hard, I can cut a lot of hairs underneath. Slide my scale down. And now what I can do is I can come in. I've got
That's
it
a
elevated.
process.
Yeah, but you can get 4 flies out of this, and I think you'll appreciate this fly and why I do that.
Well, I'm sure I will.
All right, we're cut, and we just made zonker strips. So Matt, you can go back. I'm done cutting them. Thank you. There's a lot of work for that, but at least you saw kind of a
That's
new
a great way
to make a zonker strip.
You can take rabbit hide and do the same type of thing if you'd like to.
That's a completely different beast. Careful going down that rabbit hole.
Pun intended there.
Right.
No, there wasn't a.
That's
There was
smart.
not one.
That's smart.
I just did it the other day. It's worth it, but man, if you don't need to do it, don't do it. I just needed some custom thicknesses. That's the reason I did it. So, all right, are we good to go back to
We're good to go.
tying? So what I'm gonna do is just lop off a good sized chunk of this. That's gonna be my working strip, and you see how that's a zonker strip. What I'm gonna do is come in and tie it right in over that mono, maybe 1/8 of an inch, good, secure, make sure that's on there. So that's a pretty long, and that's too long. So I'm gonna trim it to size without cutting the, thanks Matt, the fibers. And I like to cut a point at the end. It helps with the taper. Get rid of the excess. And that's about the length, about 2 times the hook. All right. So we all know that when we tie a fly like this, or should know, that we rush a cast, that thing's fouled and it's going to be bad. But we still want that fly out there. So an old saltwater fly pattern trick was to take and tie a loop like this,
Right.
right? And that did a pretty good job. But the cool thing about craft fur, and you can actually do this with rabbit, I'm going to cut a angle on that mono. I'm going to take this, I'm going to shove it right up through that craft fur, penetrate that craft fur. That's a little long. Back it up some. And see how that holds it up and back there?
Yes.
Okay. Also, when we're fishing it and we get the pause, that tail and that current is just going like
Eat me.
like it's
eat
treading
me,
water.
I'm a fly.
Like it's totally in like that freeze before flight. Okay. But obviously that's going to fall off through casting. So how do we fix that? What I'm going to do is pull that up and kind of mark where that hair is on the mono, right about there. Slide the mono away and then drop it about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to take a lighter, not a white one, Brian. All's good.
No white lighters.
Oh,
And
geez,
we
not that
don't
again.
want to take the flame right to it. I'm going to take it to the edge so we don't get that brown, black. We're just going to melt a little ball on there. And once we're there, we're done. Now that ball is going to be enough to keep that
No
craft fur
kidding.
from sliding up and
This is cool.
That is a really great trick.
I like the hard mason. I don't know that melting fluorocarbon would be a good call. I'm not a chemist, but it doesn't seem like a good combination.
Kind of look like one though.
It's the glasses. Large crystal hackle. I don't know if we sell that. It's pretty cool stuff.
We
Yes,
definitely
we do.
do.
It's kind of like the old polar chenille, but
It's a
scaled
little,
down.
Yeah.
and
I like it
doesn't
as a
have
more
the UV.
subtle.
And what I like about it is look at that sheen that it has. And if you've ever looked at a goby, it's got a lot of sheen to it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just gonna chop off some of this with my scissors and come in, tie that right up on top where I tied that. Advance my thread to not quite behind the bead chain eyes, but close. And this stuff is going up on one side, and I'm just going to come forward and fill in that body, kind of stroking all those fibers back, sweeping them, sweeping, sweeping.
Oh, that looks really good, Ted.
Yeah, and tie that down. I'll take my scissors, and in case some things got plucked away in there or lashed down, you can pluck it out. Life's good. Matt's cool guy strips. Right? These are the cool guy strips, the lateral scale. Nice thing about flash, if you don't need it when you're on the water,
You can always cut it off.
cut it off, man. And 1 strand is all it really takes. Tie that right up behind the eyes. I just bring it up and over and then kind of recenter it so it's on that side, about the same length.
Give it that lateral line.
And it really picks up a lot of light, but flickers of light without just being like a daredevil spoon of all chrome. It just gives you a little bit. And then another material that a lot of guys don't use for whatever reason. I like it, man. It's Crystal Flash in root beer color.
Rocks.
In root beer. And the other color a lot of guys don't use is Gray Ghost, man. That's really cool. It gives you that pearlescent without it just saying pearl. It's just kind of subtle pearl. I use that more than probably any other color. Taking about 3 strands, and I'm going to lay that so it's going along the back side towards me, and then I'm going to flip it up and over. Now it's on that side, and it should be, yeah, perfect. You don't even need to trim it. That's the perfect length.
Man, that is such an all-purpose fly, Ted. I think you could use this in freshwater, saltwater. I mean, anything. Right?
Yeah, you want to change the hook.
Sure.
I think it's on a SC15, Gamakatsu SC15 in the saltwater version. But yeah, and then we're going to want a really big flank feather. We should.
Hold up that bag of mallard.
I keep this in the gun safe, just so you know. Stuff not really easy to get.
I don't blame you.
Where'd you get that?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you guys can't, I know no one can. We don't have all the angles here, but Ted's digging through a pretty darn, at least a gallon size of
bag.
It looks to be mallard flank. It's kind of that wood duck color.
Yeah.
If I were to guess.
Does that
Yeah,
help
that's
with
great.
the sizing?
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
That's amazing.
You can sleep on it. Zoo cougars still work. That's
Yeah,
what
there
you
you
use
go.
for zoo cougars. Right? So, yeah. So I'm going to take that flank feather. And I want to tie this in by the tip. Again, like I did with that hen saddle earlier on the Hex, I want to measure it to make sure that those fibers are long enough from the stem to basically cover the hook. Right?
Okay.
Is that coming in?
Yep.
So this stuff is a little slippery, and that thread is a little slippery. So when I tie this in, I don't cut that. Sometimes it'll slip off. If you've never folded a hackle, what I like to do with these is I take the edge of my scissor and I run it right up along the stem of the feather, and I basically break it. And that mic's probably not so tuned where you can hear it, but when you do it, you can hear it go, oh. Sounds like that, right? You just take your scissor up against there. And what you're doing is you're breaking that rigidity of those fibers. So it's real easy now to fold that feather back, and it's secure enough. I can get rid of the tips. I'm just going to wind that collar forward.
That's a great point right there, Ted. Great pro tip.
And wind it up forward. We want a pretty good shoulder. Do that on a lot of swing flies. Tie those in same way. For steelhead swing flies.
Yes.
Come in. And as we all know, if you haven't gotten Kevin's book, it kind of talks about it at some point in there about how the gobies have a darker head. So what we're going to do, here's another old school material, sculpin wool, sheep hair.
Sculpin wool.
Yeah. And I'm going to cut off a chunk of that.
We just got some of the best looking sculpin wool in that we've had for a while.
It's like a lot of these, like feathers, man.
Yep.
Even though you don't need it, go into the shop, look at it, pick it up. I'll use this for streamer material.
I use this so much.
Yeah.
Sculpin wool is like the forgotten material.
It's just not the heads on old sculpins. I'm just combing it out, and then I'm going to grab a chunk. I like to use my 4-inch all-purpose scissors for that. And I'm going to grab those tips. A little too much. So we've got about that much right there. I'll lay that in, kind of measure it up so it goes just beyond the bend of the hook. I'm actually going to cut this like Matt noticed earlier. Come right up on top. A little lasso loop. Might even do a little figure 8. And then I'm going to make sure that thing is nice and pretty. Whip finish. 1, 2. I think one of the cool things about saltwater flies are the big thread heads and a nice glossy finish. I won't bother doing it today just because travel and so forth. I usually throw Sally Hansen's clear nail polish on that, just a drop. If you really want super high gloss, do 2 coats. But before we do that, we're going to take a marker and we're going to put those bars on there. And that's that Sharpie and
That's
gold.
that same
Yep.
metallic gold.
Yep. Copper works on this too. Frankly,
that
I don't think
looks
the fish is
great.
going to notice, but kind of the idea there is that up.
Bingo.
There you go. You kind of see what we're going after. This picture is not one I took. Photo credits to Fish Index. I've had that photo of my fly tying desk for probably since like 2010, 2011. Yeah, using that as kind of like a goby. You know, what am I trying to imitate here? So,
Is that something you do a lot of when you're tinkering with flies? Is look up, a photo of it and kind of come up with something?
not only a photo, but maybe a real one, right? So
Yeah.
basically,
there's
what I'm
no
trying to do
substitute
is,
for the real thing, right?
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
trying to take the black and white, what we know is for sure, and then deviate from that. Yeah, so it's no different than when we're tying a great mahogany dry fly, right? We're doing we're trying to match the hatch. These things have Fonzie fry, same thing, right? Little fry pattern that pops out because the salmon eggs hatch into a small. We're just trying to imitate the natural food sources.
Yeah.
Sometimes they fly, sometimes they swim.
That's what I love about this sport is it teaches you so much about the areas we like to explore and disappear to in the woods, and you get to connect with
We feel more
the
connected,
river.
right?
Yeah.
It's about the observance, and it's about the process,
It's
right?
a puzzle,
yeah, it's like part of solving the puzzle every day.
I wish I was better at puzzles, but I can't compete with my wife.
Can you do riddles?
And- Whose riddles? Yours or Timmy's?
I don't
All right,
know
we better
either,
shut
but,
that down at this point. The name Timmy. Yeah.
If you've been to the shop, you
Riddle
probably
me
met
this.
our friend Timmy. So
No, but anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in tonight.
I'm so happy we're able to
have-
get you here, Ted.
Ted,
I mean,
it's-
you're so much fun. You got so much great knowledge, and
Thanks.
Your
you
approach
got-
is amazing.
yeah,
It's very detailed.
it's very admirable.
Yeah, you do a
You
great
take
job
the
with
time to learn it and match it, and focus in on all the little details. And I think that's something
There were
everybody can learn from.
so many tips that everyone could take away from tonight. So thank you so much. We hope to get you back again soon.
Yeah. Check out Ted at current dash, not a slash, not an underscore, dash works, current/works, or I screwed it up, current-works.com.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and check out the fly fishing film tour
Next week.
weekend. I can't believe it already. I'm gonna
Next
hit the music here,
And we'll see you at the fly fishing show coming up in March, and we still have some available dates for steelhead. So
yeah,
support your local fly shop. We appreciate your business, everyone.
wherever your
Thanks
fly
for
shop
tuning in.
is, we always love seeing people kick out some orders from these and getting people materials. So
Yeah.
we'll get the material list up as soon as possible. Tie through the snowstorm, people,
Yeah.
and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a great night. Thanks, Ted.